Hello, everyone. This is the 200th episode of the Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog. For this episode, I interview Spanish football fan Mr. Ramon Morera as we discuss Spanish club Real Sociedad during its glory years in the early 1980s. Welcome, Ramon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Can you introduce yourself and your trajectory into football?
Sure. Well, as you said, my name is Ramon, and even if you already introduced, I think my accent derives, everyone will derive easily. I'm not American. I'm original from Spain, 52 years old, and moved to the US 9 years ago with the family. I started following football, I could say, around 1980, where my dad introduced me to La Liga. And since then, I've always been following Real Sociedad, especially through radio, via radio, and staying up late on Sundays to watch the highlights of the journey in the Studio Stadio. And also playing with friends, where I met some of my best friends ever through football, including here. We created the first fan club of Real Sociedad in the US.
So let's trace the journey of this team. What was their place in the Spanish football landscape as we come to the mid late 1970s?
In the 70s, La Real was a team that was well established in First Division after having win promotion in 1967. To that point, we even reached three times the fourth position in La Liga in 74, 75, and 79. If I remember right, we played even twice the semifinals of the La Copa. Copa del Generalissimo first and Copa del Rey after. In the mid 70s, we qualified for first time for the European football, although the first experiences were rather short. In 74, we played UEFA Cup, but we went out in the first round against Banik Ostrava. We lost heavily 5-0. And in 75, we played Grasshoppers, and for first time, we went through the first round. But we were unlucky to be drawn against a really strong Liverpool at that time in 1975, and we lost 9-1. Two things that are important about that face-off about Liverpool is first, it was the debut of a young goalkeeper that will become legend in the team called Luis Arconada. And second, in Liverpool, there was playing a striker that will become key also in the story of today, that is John Toshak. Mhm.
How would you compare and contrast Real Sociedad with their Basque neighbors Athletic Bilbao?
I would say at that time was not a big difference between them. Both were fundamentally Basque-only players, teams with a style of football that was similar to the British clubs, with a strong academy base and with a football rather direct and really brave in the way of playing. I would say Bilbao has always been the bigger club of the two, just because also Bilbao is a bigger city. And maybe Real Sociedad has a stronger academy base. Even today, even that we play with foreign players, we still have a higher share of academy players in the club. But all in all, we're similar clubs.
Let's discuss the Real Sociedad manager fundamental in the story,
Mhm.
Alberto Ormachea. Let's discuss his trajectory
Mhm.
as a player and upon his appointment as Real Sociedad manager in 1978.
Ormaechea started in the club as a player. As you said, he joined in from Eibar in the second team, started playing as a right back, although he evolved to the left back pretty soon. He started playing for the first team in 61, played in second division until the promotion of 67, and then he played 239 games until he retired in 74. When he retired, he moved to the position of assistant manager, where he will be promoted to first coach in 78 when Jose Antonio Irulegui ran out of contract and left for Espanyol.
Real Sociedad had been a more or less a mid-table team,
Yeah.
But in his first full season in charge, 1978-79, Sociedad finished fourth and qualified to the UEFA Cup.
Mhm.
What were the significant changes that Ormacha made for such a progress?
I would say it was an evolution rather than a revolution. Inherited a quite talented group of players. That was the base of that. He still managed to had a good performance from the more veteran. But what he did is change from a 4-4-2 to a 4-3-3 with a counter-attacking style of playing. But from time to time, Lob Farde was one of the key players will join the center field and still play 4-4-2. I would say it was more having the patience to wait for those great players to mature and evolve as a team and keep the team together. At that time, players like Arconada, Zamora, Satrustegui were key, were in the 23, 24 years old. That means the team was right for the results.
Let's discuss the backbone of the
Mhm.
squad at Ormacha's disposal upon taking
Mhm.
over. Who would be the protagonist of this great Real Sociedad adventure? You already mentioned Arconada, but of course there's others.
Yeah. I would say on top of Arconada, the other main players will be Jesus Zamora, that would be the one to score the goal of the first title. Roberto López Ufarte was the number 11 and a key player both for Real Sociedad and Spain. Satrustegui, number 9, that was is still the top scorer of the team. And maybe Perico Alonso, but for some will be known as the father of Xavi Alonso, the current coach of Real Madrid. But there were many others like Cortabarria, Celayeta, Olaizola. But I would say the main five would be Arconada, Zamora, Loptufarte, Satrustegui, or Perico Alonso.
It was in the 1979-80 season that this Sociedad squad showed its potential by nearly winning the league title, losing only one match during the season. And it was only they lost by 1 point to Real Madrid. Was it self-evident at this point that this team had the potential to actually win a league title?
Yes and no. I think at that time, what we need to make clear is that Real Madrid was the clear dominator of the Spanish football to the point that in 1980, they managed to do something I think is unprecedented in the story of football. They played the final of the Cup, the first team against the second team. That shows how strong they were. Then, yes, it was a really good team. We were playing really well, but I don't think anyone expected us to contend as heavily as we did and to do as well as we did.
Also, there's a European adventure that season in the
Mhm.
UEFA Cup, but Sociedad lose to
Mhm.
Italian giants Inter.
Yeah. And that is considered by many one of the key moments of Real Sociedad because after losing 3-0 at San Siro, we managed a great game at home where we defeated Inter by 2 goals and we were really close to qualify. And many consider that game like the moment where the players realized they could do something great. And despite of losing La Liga, as you say, by 1 point, the team really started believing in themselves. And that was the first time we beat Real Madrid for a long time. We nearly beat them at Bernabeu as well. That means the team was really growing confidence and playing most likely the best football ever we ever played.
And I seem to remember the previous season, I think, Sporting Gijón had really pushed Real Madrid to the end. So maybe there was this confidence that, I guess, so-called smaller teams could actually achieve something if they really tried harder.
Yeah. And at that time, many titles were decided by 1 or 2 points, always in the last 2 games of the season. But majority of the times it was Real Madrid winning. If I remember right, in the 70s, they managed to secure 6 out of 10 titles. The others being 1 or 2 was Atletico, one Valencia, and one Barcelona. That shows that they were really the
Right.
dominant team at that time.
Let's get into the 1980-81 season
Mm.
where Sociedad would win the league title.
Mhm.
And also, there's also another run in the UEFA Cup. Again, you have to remember, like you said, Sociedad promote from within, so there's not much transfer activity in those years.
Mhm.
I think Jose Maria Baquero and Laranaga, they moved up from the youth team, but
Yeah.
again, they're still not factors in the main team. So it's still a solid base of the team with the players we mentioned. And there's others like Gajate, Gastelu, other Uralde, other players like that who are forming this core of a team that's going to win the title. As far as the league race itself, again, it goes to the end and it's decided on goal average, I believe. Both Sociedad and Real Madrid end up with 45 points. And actually, Real Madrid had a better goal difference, but I believe Sociedad's goal average was probably better.
It was the head-to-head that was the decisive factor at that time. It doesn't matter how many goals you score or you concede. It was the team-to-team. And what happened is Real Madrid won the first game in Bernabeu 1-0, but we managed a 3-1 at home. That will be the decisive factor at the end. This is what made the difference in the title. But as you say, it was a really competitive season. The team didn't have a good start of the season. Maybe having lost the prior league after managing 38 games unbeaten had a toll in the players. We were mid-table until week 7. Little by little, the team started playing better, and we hovered between the 5th position and the 2nd position until the game 23rd. At that time, we have a little bit of another positive downside, and we moved to the 7th place. And Atletico was the team dominating. It seems that Atletico would secure the league, but they managed to win any of the last 7 games. And this is where the head-to-head between Real Sociedad and Real Madrid will start. We reached the first position 4 games to the end of the tournament, and we secured the title in the last game, securing 1 point in El Molinón against Sporting de Gijón that you mentioned. That was a really strong team at the time, with a goal in the minute 89-30. That means it was the last ball of the game, was 17 seconds to the end with a goal of Jesus Zamora that is known by everyone in Real Sociedad as El Gol de Zamora, because it was the goal that really made the difference and gave us the first title.
And I would like to correct my error. Earlier, I said it was goal average that decided, but it was actually head to head.
Yeah,
Yeah, so my mistake, sorry.
no
So
problem.
also in the UEFA Cup, it's a satisfactory run. They eliminate Hungarian side,
Mm.
Újpest Dózsa, then the Czechoslovakian side, Zbrojovka, Brno, and finally in the third round they will lose to Belgian side Lokeren. That included players like the Polish Lato and Preben Elker, the Danish striker. Even though they were eliminated in the third round, it was their longest run in Europe at the time.
Yeah, it was the first time to reach the round of the last 8 teams. And it was also important point to start winning international experience after the head-to-head against Inter that we discussed. The team was growing in experience both at national level but also international level, yes.
We have to bear in mind that Spain are to be the hosts of the 1982 World Cup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Spanish manager was at this point Santa Maria. And he chose to make the backbone of his team to be made up of the Real Sociedad contingent. Was this only natural given the team's success? And was that accepted by the media given the dominance of Real Madrid and Barcelona in the Spanish football culture?
Let's start by saying that at that time, Barcelona were not the giants that are today. Barcelona was just another team, to the fact that I still explain to my American friends.
No.
And when I was 15, 16, I've seen more titles of Real Sociedad than titles of Barcelona.
Yes, we should mention from 1960 to 1985, Barcelona only won in 1974. Of course, first season. Yeah.
And I was only one. That means the first title I saw was in 86. Then I would say it was natural to base in Real Sociedad. The team was really good. it was also a team that worked really well together. The bringing a backbone of a team is a formula works well. However, it doesn't mean it was well accepted. Especially in Madrid, many people was expecting more Real Madrid players. Also, historically and socially, we need to put into context that 82 was still relatively close to the Franco era. Spain had a slow transition towards democracy. That means for many, seeing a team based on Basque players was not the ideal scenario. And there was some pushback, especially from the press in Madrid. However, from a sporting point of view, or football point of view, I don't think there were better players at that time than Real Sociedad players.
In fact, the captain of the Spanish national team was Arconada. You still have Zamora, Perico Alonso, Satustegui, Lopez Ufarte, and also
Mhm.
Celayeta and Uralde also received a handful of caps in this period.
And there were others also that they played. I think it's like 8 or 10 players of that team managed to have international football. The other part that is important to mention that Spain arrived to the 82 World Cup after a really good run in 81, including defeating England at Wembley, and that was with the goals of two Real Sociedad players. That means the players were really establishing themselves well in the national team as well.
Let's look at the 1981-82 seasons,
Mm.
and Real Sociedad repeat as champions. After it looked like Barcelona, they looked like to be the likely winners in the final stretch of a season, but then they imploded and Real Sociedad overtook them. And in fact, the title was won with a win over Bilbao, I think, on the last day.
Yes.
So, can you discuss this season and how was this title different than the previous one?
I think the difference with the prior season is the team was more regular. As we mentioned in the prior season, the team started mid-table, then went up, then down, and then secured the top positions only at the end. Here, the team was always top three the whole season, was always really strong. And we were top of the table in the initial period, I think, until the match day 13. Then Barcelona would become leaders, and only in the last two games we managed to go back to the first position. As you say, they implode. Barcelona at that time had a really good team with players like Bernd Schuster, Alan Simonsen, or Kini, that was the top scorer with 27 goals. By the way, they managed also to sign a small Argentinian player called Diego Maradona that year. But if we go back, as you said, they imploded in the last two games. And it was a defeat against Real Madrid that was the triggering point in 2 games to the end. But even worse than that, they were 5 points ahead of us with 6 games to the end, and they only managed 2 points. That means two draws in the last 6 games.
And this is at the era of 2 points for a win, so 5 points
Correct.
was significant. Yeah.
Yeah, the team was more mature. I would say if you look from a supporter point of view, was less emotional. The team was more mature. We had already a title, but also everyone saw us a strong candidate. I could say it was more natural than the first one. That was really an explosion of something no one could see as becoming champions.
And even Jose Maria Baquero, I think he played like one or two matches that season.
Yes, there were at that time really good academy players coming up the ranks. Was Jose Maria Vaquero.
However, in Europe, they were eliminated in the first round to Bulgarian side CSK Sofia, so they could concentrate on the league. Can you explain just how significant were these two league titles, given the minimal transfer activity by the club and this general policy of promoting from within?
To put a bit into context for the people following the show, until that point, only 7 teams in Spain have ever won La Liga. And since 1950, only 5 different teams have won La Liga. That means it was really a big thing. Then if we add to that it was a club formed by all the players having been raised less than 50 miles from San Sebastian, that shows how special it was for the area. Also, many of those players grew up playing together on the beach of San Sebastian. It's a special beach called La Concha. where all the weekends was full of kids playing football. That means it was really close to the hearts of the people in San Sebastian, but also outside, and I can count myself among them. Then you mentioned the topic of promoting from within. That was the key, and still is a key success factor of Real Sociedad. That meant that we focus on what we had and secure that those players then with the team. Just to give you an example, Real Sociedad is the team with more one-man clubs in Spain. We have 17 one-man club players. 10 of them played at that time. That means it's a team that played together for their whole life. They started as the kids on the beach until they retire. There are a couple of exceptions that left the team, as you mentioned, Vaquero, López Ufarte, but majority of them made from day one to the retirement was with Real Sociedad.
Unheard of these days.
Yes.
Also, to kind of echo what we said earlier, you have at Barcelona players like Schuster, Alan Simonson. At Real Madrid, you have Uli Stielike. Of course, Maradona would join Barcelona the following season. At Atletico Madrid, you have Hugo Sanchez. So there were big foreign stars playing in the league. And despite that, Sociedad managed to win the league title.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, it was a time where the teams could only have 3 foreign players. That shows that, or that allowed academic clubs to be stronger. And also the laws at that time allowed the teams to retain the players. That means if Barcelona, as they did several times, will come for Arconada or Zamora, Real Sociedad could decide not to sell them. There was not a release clause, or there was not a way for the players other than having a direct confrontation with the team to leave the club. Different times.
This was the extent of Real Sociedad's dominance domestically. As for the next few seasons, there would be more or less a mid-table team. Why do you think the team stagnated after this?
There are several factors coming together, but one that was decisive is the injuries of some key players. In 82, we'll see knee injuries season long for Zamora and Satrústegui. Later on, will happen the same with Arconada in 85. And none of them managed to play at the same level afterwards. Satrústegui retiring pretty soon after. Zamora still managing to play even for Spain or Arconada, but never at the same level. They were at their peak of their level and when they got the injuries. Also, some players left the team, like Perico Alonso being transferred to Barcelona, and others were just getting older. We will see in 84 and 85 key players like Cortabarria, Olaizola, or Diego retiring. There were those youngsters we said coming through the ranks, but it was too early for them. I believe Vaquero, when he made it to the first team, was 18 years old. Bekenstein was 19. Was too early for them to manage to keep the team at the same level.
Did the pressure from the 1982 World Cup and Spain's poor performances have an effect? As coincidence or not, it seems to have been like a reference point for the team's decline.
I would make a difference between different players. I do believe one player that had that impact was López Ufarte. You just can see that the 81-82, he scored 11 goals. The next season, he would only score 4. For others, I wouldn't say so. If I look at players like Arconada or Zamora, I don't think was ever decline in the performance. It was more the injuries. To the topic of pressure, Arconada will be the only one to still play for Spain in a regular basis after 82. And it will lead Spain to the final of the European Championship in 84, where he considered the unfortunate famous goal of Platini.
Do you think the new Spanish manager, Miguel Munoz, was it deliberate? Was he under pressure to perhaps to discard many of the Real Sociedad players?
I think so. There was a need of a change because there were high hopes in the 82 World Cup after having seen England, Germany, or Argentina winning at home. Everyone had high hopes. Even I would say there were at least 10 teams better than Spain at the time. Then there was a push for a change after Santa Maria And Miguel Muñoz was a Real Madrid man, and he brought the Real Madrid players back. But I would say there was pressure from the press, especially.
Real Sociedad actually would do well in Europe and they would reach the semifinals of the 1982-83 Champions Cup before being eliminated by SV Hamburg. Was this the last great performance of this great generation?
Yes, and that was the last great performance of Real Sociedad. Although I would not say only that tournament, that season also, Real Sociedad will manage to win the first ever Super Cup. There was a newly
Oh,
established
yeah.
tournament at that time, defeating Real Madrid 4-1 with an extra time in San Sebastian. Will reach the semifinals of the Cup as well that year, but nothing compares to the performance in the Copa de Europa or European Champions Cup, where we managed to reach the semifinals against SV Hamburg, as you mentioned, and we were minutes away to the extra time. Actually, the game ended at 2-1 with a goal with a more than likely offside from SV Hamburg. That, despite all the players complaining, send us home and allow Hamburg to go through and become the European champions against Juventus.
In that run, Sociedad defeated Icelandic side
Mhm.
Vikingur Reykjavik, but most notably Scottish side Celtic Glasgow, and then Portuguese side Sporting Clube de Portugal. So
Yeah,
decent teams on their way to
yeah.
the semifinals.
And to the point that we say of new players, just to give you an example, the 2-1 victory against the Sporting League, the goals were scored by Vaquero, that was already in the second or third year with the team, and a young centre back called Gurruchaga, that was like the sixth centre back of the team. That shows that the team was going through some injuries, and despite that, it was still performing well.
In the following two seasons, Sociedad witnessed their Basque neighbors Athletic Bilbao capture two league titles of their own. How was this regarded at the time?
I believe that for anyone that was not a Real Madrid player, we were just happy to see someone else winning the title, and that it would include also Real Sociedad supporters. Also, we need to take into account that the relationship between the clubs was great at that time. Was also a political situation where Basque were coming together because speaking Basque or speaking Catalan that not long before was not allowed in Spain. Then I would say everyone was happy with having another team that was not Real Madrid winning. We were still securing the Super Cup and having the extended run in the Champions Cup, as you mentioned. Then overall, for Real Sociedad, we were in a really good mood at that time.
And Bilbao's title in 1984, the last match was against Sociedad. I can imagine Real Madrid fans might have said, did they say that at the time that maybe Sociedad were not really pulling all their weight behind this match or something like that?
For sure. And there was a time where there were a lot of rumors, and more than rumors, it was confirmed that clubs will pay other teams to win against others. For example, when we lost the league in 80 to 81, it was confirmed by Sevilla that they received money from Real Madrid for beating Real Sociedad. Then it was always those rumors of these teams tries to favor that one, and it was a strong rumor that Real Sociedad didn't perform at their best against Bilbao. Yes.
Alberto Ormacha, he stayed on until 1985 and was replaced by the Welshman John Toshak that you mentioned earlier, the former Liverpool star. Was it inevitable that a new perspective was needed?
Football and teams have cycles. At that time, Real Sociedad needed fresh air, yes. Um, if we look back and consider the style of playing of the team and that the British football was the clear dominant at that time, was the clear and natural consequence to go that direction. As you know, between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest, they were the clear dominants in the early 80s, and I guess it was only natural to look for someone coming from the British Islands.
And as far as Ormacha himself, is he regarded perhaps as Real Sociedad's greatest ever manager because of his two league titles?
Yes, to the point that if you go to the stadium, there is a statue of him at the entrance of the stadium. He's a legend.
Under the Welshman John Toshak, there would be a somewhat of a mini revival with a 1987 Copa del Rey triumph in a penalty kick shootout against Atletico Madrid, as well as the runner-up position in 1987-88. This would be the season where Baquero, Lopez Recarte, Begiristain, all those players would be the stars of a team. So was there a belief that perhaps Sociedad might be able to recapture its former glory?
Tuchel was a great coach and he managed to bring the team to an amazing level. However, at that time, Real Madrid had one of the greatest generation of players with Butragueño,
Oh, La
Michel,
Quinta del
Martin Vázquez,
Butre.
and they added Hugo Sanchez. That means beating them was really difficult. Just to put into context, Real Sociedad managed the same points when we won La Liga in 81, and we still went 11 points behind Real Madrid. That shows how dominant they were at that time. But it was a great time. The team played amazing. I believe it's the season before we managed to win 5 of the games at home by 6-0. Was really a festival going to Atocha to watch the games. And as you say, we managed to secure the Copa del Rey and we will go to play another final against Barcelona. That means it was a really good run, but it was new times, there were more money in football, there were new rules, and it was really difficult for anyone to compete anymore.
And Barcelona, with Johan Cruyff as their new manager, that summer they captured Baquero, Begristein, and Lopez Recarte.
Exactly. And they will become integral part of the Johan Cruyff team.
But at least they did loan Juan Goycochea.
They did, although in the other side, they announced the signing of the players 2 weeks before playing the final of the Cup against them. And I guess that didn't help us in trying to win the title.
Do you think the 1980s and beyond, the Basque only policy and little transfer activity had an impact, and how was it regarded at the time?
Before the change of the rules, when you could retain the players, I think makes sense to invest in the academy and try to have an academy-based policy. If it's Basque or not, you can always decide, but it was a local team. The moment the rules changed and it became transfer more easy to the point, as you say, that Barcelona could sign 3 of the best players of Real Sociedad in one go, or Real Madrid could sign Hugo Sanchez, Maceda, and Gordillo in the same year, made that a structural change in the way of looking at how you form the team. And that made Real Sociedad more open to go to the market because it was even a situation of survival. You only invest in academy players, and every year 2 or 3 of your best players are leaving. Your academy needs to be amazing. And that opened a healthy debate within the club that led to the decision to change the way to look at the market and to open for first time in a long period to sign foreign players in 1989, when we signed John Aldridge as the first foreigner in a while.
And Dalian Atkinson and Kevin Richardson followed him. And by all accounts, all three had a good spell at Real Sociedad. There have been highs and lows in the last 4 decades, with Sociedad finishing second in 2003, but also being relegated in this
Mm-hmm.
time. What is the outlook of the club these days in the modern Spanish football landscape?
I would say under the current president, Joaquin Aperribay, the club started a solid plan to establish themselves as one of the top teams in Spain. It took the team we were in second division. He managed to bring the team back to the first division, start little by little, creating a more solid team with a combination of academy players and an excellent recruiting. And nowadays we are now, I would say, one of the best historic moments. Even if last year we didn't qualify for Europe, but in the 5 years before, we managed to win a title again with La Copa, and played in Europe 5 consecutive seasons. That was the best run ever. Then overall, I would say we have a good moment for the team. And we are seeing nowadays like a stronghold for developing talent, local and international, with players like Luka Sucic or Ori Oskarsson, but before like Alex Isak.
Is the 1980s era always seen as the benchmark today, or is it more or less forgotten by younger fans?
Huh. Younger fans only have heard of that era. Many of them that were not born, and is considered an exception, happy exception, but not a benchmark. I would say the benchmark for Real Sociedad nowadays is to play European football and ideally Champions League, like happened last time in 22-23. But I wouldn't say that winning La Liga is a benchmark anymore.
Perhaps Luis Arconada is the most emblematic player of this generation. What can you say about his significance in cultural terms?
Arconada was the biggest player of his generation in Spain, and maybe the best goalkeeper of that time. But it was more than that. It was the first player to sell football jerseys across the country. In the 80s, you will only have the jersey of your team, but you go across Spain, you could see Arconada jerseys with all the kids. All the kids wanted to be goalkeeper. For many that we play football at that time, the goalkeeper was the one with the ball or the one that couldn't play another position. And he became the captain of the team, the captain of Spain, and a reference for many players. I could say a couple of examples. One is Iker Casillas, Real Madrid goalkeeper, that always said that Arconada is the greatest goalkeeper he had ever seen. Socially, it was amazing. It was the sensation that was the leader of the team, and it was unbeatable to the point that when Real Sociedad in the 80s was awarded a penalty against us, the whole stadium will start singing, "No pasa nada, tenemos Arconada." That means, don't worry, Arconada is in goal. Everyone was sure it will save the team. We will win because of him. And then, as an athlete beyond football, he's been awarded many times with reference titles or for his contribution, including the Premio Marca. Marca is the biggest newspaper in football in Spain, where he shares the Premio Marca with athletes like Michael Jordan or Severiano Ballesteros. If I'm not wrong, FIFA nominated him like best Spanish player of the last 25 years in 2000, in the year 2000, something like that. It was really an icon of the generation.
And in the lead up to the 1982 World Cup, I think there were a lot of print ads of him for Coca-Cola.
For Coca-Cola and for El Corte Inglés, that was where you will go shopping. You will see Arconada in a fancy suit saving the ball, yes.
Who do you think are the more underrated players of this generation that deserve recognition?
I wouldn't say underrated, but the player that comes more to mind is Jesus Zamora. For me, Jesus Zamora was unbelievable. Was maybe one of the top 3 or top 5 midfielder of his time. It was a box-to-box, technically gifted, and with ability to score. If I put in together's time, and I try to use former Real Sociedad players that are well known, I would say it was a mix of Martin Odegaard and Mikel Merino. López Ufarte was also amazing. Was another player that was a reference. His style of playing was more like Leo Messi. The ones less known, I would say the center backs, Portabarria and Gorrit, they were key and instrumental in the consecution of the titles.
And Goriz was kind of called up late to the national team. Like Luis Suarez selected him in '88 at a time where maybe he was even past his prime, but still, at least he received some recognition then.
Yeah.
In closing, what is the legacy of this Real Sociedad dominance in the early 1980s in Spanish football history, culturally and sociologically?
I would say the legacy is showing everyone that the team with local players that play together since we were kids, without foreigners, without players that were signed by a big fee, could managed to defeat the giants of Real Madrid. It would show a different era of football in Spain. That is from a football point of view. From a social point of view, was also showing a new time for Spain. Spain came through the end of the dictatorship, the transition to the democracy. But until 1978, for example, the Basque flag or the Catalan flag were illegal. Seeing a team with the Basque flag winning the title was big for many people that were not even Real Sociedad supported or Basque, because show a new era of Spain.
With that, I would like to thank you for your participation in this interview. All our respective contact information is listed on the blog and podcast uploads. So, Ramon, thank you once again and hope to continue these discussions on football history.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.